Okay, so good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, and welcome to the final PA Forum Zoom series of 2020, where we finish with a bang with Malcolm Taylor from Your Excellency Limited. Malcolm, if you haven't met him before, delivered a fantastic introduction to finance session for us at the PA Forum Learning and Development Conference, and is here today to share a project management masterclass with us. So without further ado, welcome, Malcolm.
Thanks for that, Dan. No pressure. I like the word masterclass. So before I start, welcome to everybody. But I would just like to congratulate all of those that were involved in the awards last night. So sitting on our sofa, Lindsay and I watching all of that stuff, absolutely amazing. So congratulations to all those that were. Organisers, contenders, winners, supporters, sofa sitters, all of those. It was just, for a virtual event, it was just absolutely incredible. And I think Lindsay's now hiring Mr. and Mrs. Gray to come and live with us for the next 12 months or something, because I think she's falling in love with those people and all the costumes and all that sort of stuff. So very good. So let's get going on this. I think Dan had originally said about 40 minutes. I think it's going to be about 50, a bit longer. He's probably got a headache after last night, so he's probably not going to shout at me too much if we overrun there. So just some quick introductions. I'll just do this for me. It would be great to hear from all of you, but with 40 odd people here, that might take a little bit of time. So my name's Malcolm Taylor. Lindsay and I formed Your Excellency Limited way back in 2007, but prior to that, I spent 25 years in around large global corporations. I trained as an accountant, wriggled out of that and ran finance and operations and businesses across the globe, and then managed to jump off the corporate ladder and do something much more exciting and work with people development, which is what we do now. Just another piece of information. I don't normally have this lopsided handlebar thing that's going on here, but I am growing it during the month, supporting the Men's Mental and Physical Health Foundation called Movember. So got another 3 or 4 days to go, and then I have to decide what to do with it. Although I think the family are going to decide for me, so I think it will be on the floor at midnight on December the 30th. So as we go through this, like all training, I would just like you to challenge yourself and ask the question. So how and where does this apply to me? How and where does this apply to me? So you might think, oh, this is great, yeah, and you might see the instant application of it, or you might think, I'm not sure about this, but challenge yourself to think about that a little bit. And with that question, you can then link it to, what will you be able to do after this workshop? What will you be able to do different? How you'll be, that's, that margin better. We're always striving for, to be marginally better. So how can you put this into play? Because knowledge is of no value unless you actually put it into practice. So there's your challenge for the day. My challenge is to get this done in 50 minutes. So let's see. So what are we going to do during this masterclass, as Dan calls it? I really do like that name here. So before we start to dive in and think about projects, we need to be clear to make sure we know, what is a project versus what is not a project. So we'll just spend a few minutes on that, then give you an overview. So project management has, fundamentally 4 stages. You might see on various models many more, but generally there's 4 stages in order to make them successful. So I kind of picked for this session the planning stage. So we'll have a look and make sure you know the 4 stages, but actually we're going to be using the second phase, the planning, for today in our short session. So in order to understand what a project is, we need to be able to define it. So I've got a couple of headings up here on my whiteboard. So projects versus routine work. So why don't you just have a little think, and then we'll test your thinking against the rest of my whiteboard. what do you think defines a project versus routine work? Just have a little think about that. You might even want to jot it down. You know, if we were in a smaller group and I could ask all the questions here, you know, what are the sort of things that you might write down for routine versus projects? Just have a think about that, just for a minute, and then we'll see how we compare that to my thinking around this. A little bit of writing going on, a little bit of brain whirring going on there. Let's have a little look then, shall we? So routine work, as the word says, routine work performed regularly, or it could be ongoing in nature. So I suggest, you know, within the profession in which we're operating here, for a lot of you, you have a lot of routine tasks. So there's things that you do every day, or you have to do it weekly, or it might be, you know, arranging and organising a meeting on a monthly basis. But you kind of do that on an ongoing. It's regularly on your to-do list. So I wonder what you thought about the project piece. There's some great things coming in here in the chat already. So yeah, project, it's unique. It's different to this routine stuff. It wouldn't appear on your list every week. It has specific objectives. Yeah, actually, I like that. So Anna's put in there, routine includes reactive, and that's, you know, so here we're more talking about, you know, planned stuff. It may be quite complex. It might have multiple facets, so it might have specific objectives within specific objectives. But often the key thing around here is that it has a deadline. So it has a life. It has a beginning, and it has a middle, and it has an end. You know, sometimes some large projects, people get left and hanging around in them and don't realise they've actually finished. But you know, a project does, you know, it has this beginning, middle, and an end. So just thinking about that, as you started to define your project definition, why don't you have a little think about, okay, so what projects am I involved in versus my routine work? And maybe for the purposes of the next 40 minutes or so, see if you can select a project that you are working on, that perhaps you have worked on in the past, or something that you are going to work on in the future. Why don't you see if you can think of a project? Nothing too mammoth. We don't want motorways from from the north to the south. But you know, think about, so it could be business related, could be a work related thing, or it could be something that's personal. But think about something that you could use as a project, that as we go through some of the steps here, that you could think about, you know, how does that apply here, and could I start to work on it and think about it? So it's something that, you know, has some milestones, has some facets, has some objectives, but it certainly has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Have a little think about that. Okay, so hopefully a few of you have got some examples that we can have a play with. So let's have a look. Before we dive in too much, this is what's known as the project life cycle. So I picked out 4 of the main stages here that I think predominantly for the most of us and the types of projects that we're involved in, you know, this gives us a very good framework within which to operate. It might be if we were doing something really complex, we might want to break these down a little bit. And you might see if you Google project management and did visuals or something, you might find a few more stages. But even those would be, you know, just a breakdown of these 4 stages here. So we have preparation, we have planning, we have to deliver, we have to evaluate, and at certain times, of course, that might go back into the preparation, and the whole thing might start again. So today we're going to look at the second stage, the planning. So before we go into that, often I get asked about, well, Malcolm, isn't preparation and planning the same thing? So maybe we need to get a little bit of clarity. We're only looking at the planning and we're jumping the preparation. So I think it would be useful just to spend a couple of minutes to make sure we know what preparation is versus what planning is. So preparation is really the upfront organisation. There's no doing involved in that. And actually, there might not be a massive amount of detail. What preparation is about is giving us the clarity, or sometimes even the justification for actually starting or getting involved in this project. So usually the sort of questions that are asked on that is, what's going to be gained by jumping into this? So is it a financial gain? Is it efficiency? Something that helps us with customers? Might be health and safety or legal. There's quite a few projects going on, at the moment where offices, working at home and going back to the office and all of that sort of thing. So, it might not be a financial type of thing, but it's, what's this about? So it's more about determining the outcomes and the goals. A business case is a really good example on this. And, it helps us define what the scopes are, the parameters, the success criteria, might be around stakeholder and buy-in. And the reason this is important is because we have to have clarity as to why we're doing this thing. And actually at this stage, you might find that it doesn't go any further. We don't get to the planning stage because the business case says actually it doesn't make sense, or we need to do something different or elsewhere. So that's preparation. Whereas the planning, the piece that we're actually going to have a look at, is much more around what specifically needs to be completed. So it's what, when does it need to be done by, and who is responsible for it. So this is a lot more detail around this. So, the preparation is around, okay, so we're going to go and do this, and this is why we're doing it. This is much more around the planning. And you've all seen this one here with the warning that, often we dive into our projects and we might have some ideas in our heads, but we just want to get going with the thing. But as we well know, failing to plan is planning to fail. So we need to carry that health warning before we dive in more. So when we're thinking about planning, I've broken this down into 6 steps of planning to help us have a bit of structure. For some of us, we love to just get going. Some of us really like to plan and have lots of details, but this is trying to rein in the people that want to get going and support the people that want to plan. So the first step here is to identify our tasks. Actually, what this is really about is, so what's the to-do list? So we formalize it and say identify the task, but really this is just a to-do list. So most of us, when we're thinking about a project, we will automatically do this. We'll start writing down a list, or we have the list mentally in our head. So I would like you, perhaps those of you that could think of a project to play with during this session, why don't you just, either in your mind or write down, whichever your preference, why don't you write down some tasks that are part of this project? Just write them down. What have I got to do? What's my to-do list look like? Write a few down. I like your comments there on your soldier and the peas, Anna. I also like the cradle to grave there as well. Okay, so you've got a few things there. So when I'm doing a bit of project planning, probably like a lot of you, I like to use Post-it notes. So the project planner in there, writing down the Post-it notes, writing on the Post-it notes. I love Post-it notes. We have Post-it notes everywhere in our house. We don't actually need to decorate because we use the walls for Post-it notes, and you can change it when you like. So often it's good to write down one task per Post-it note. Great for visibility, very flexible, and you can move them around. So that's the first stage. So first of all, we need to identify, first step, what is it we've got to do. Next, we could start to organize them. So actually we can put them into a process flow map. So I've just used the classic example of how to make a cup of tea here and got a few post-it notes to start us off on that. So interestingly, when you were doing your tasks, it may be that you already started to do this. You may have already naturally done a process flow map or sequentially started to put these together. But it's great, and the reason I use the make a cup of tea example here is because you may have done this exercise before. Is that you write down all of the things, and then somebody pretends to be an alien or something like that, and has to follow the tasks. And then sometimes things happen like we've got to go and buy a new kettle because they blew the kettle up because we told them to turn the kettle on and they didn't put any water in there. So this is a really good test with a group of people with your post-it notes to share as to, have I got all of the tasks here? Will this process work? You know, here's a new Christmas game for you. When you get together in your Christmas bubbles, you can somebody can write down a process, and then somebody else has got to follow it by the post-it notes and see what's missing, see what goes on here. So we need to arrange our to-do lists into a process map so that we can see the flow. But next, the next piece to this is that actually we need to understand what's called the sequencing of this. So we've done this in a single list, one after the other, 3 after 2, 4 after 3. But actually, if we look at this and we think about, how do we help with the resources, or what's really the sequencing here? Actually, we can create what's called another swim lane. So now we've got 2 swim lanes here, because getting cups from the shelf have got nothing to do really with boiling kettles. So we know when we make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee that we put the kettle on, and then we go and grab the cup, and we might go and sort the tea bag out, or all that sort of stuff. It hasn't actually got anything related with the kettle boiling. So we've got a separate task here. And in fact, it could be that when we think about it, it's like, well, actually, there could be a 3rd swim lane here, because the milk's got nothing to do with getting cups. So already we've started to think about which tasks are related, which order they have to go, and which tasks could perhaps be done simultaneously. I don't suggest that we need an army of people to make a cup of tea, but in theory, you know, somebody could be focusing on the kettle, or we could go to the cup, or somebody else could be organizing milk, and you know, somebody else could be doing, you know, teapot warming and all that sort of stuff. So, and you might find that people have different skill sets in different areas. So actually you want to, you know, create a different swim lane for different facets of the project. Not the most complicated of projects here. So. Just reading here, Tracy's put, used to have what's called, war rooms. So yeah, had lots of war rooms. We have war rooms in my office here, and blackboard in the kitchen. Post-it notes are fantastic for that. Great for visuals, and you can leave them up on the wall, and you can go back and you can re-look at them, and you can, you know, see what's happened, or you can completely mess a project up, because when somebody turns their back, you can move a few post-it notes or take them away or see what's missing. So I love that. Okay, so we've got our tasks. We've started to understand some of the sequencing about that through post-it notes. But actually what would probably be quite a good idea is if we, because it's getting a little bit more complex and maybe we're going beyond making a cup of tea, is that actually what we really now need to do is to formalize our process. So we could create what's called a Gantt chart. So probably seen these, probably heard of it. I don't know how much you know. Mr. Gantt, Henry Gantt, was an American mechanical engineer. He created his charts, which became known as Gant Charts, more than 100 years ago. So it was the early 1900s. So he was a consultant for factory production and planning. So he started to use these type of charts. I doubt whether that's him sitting in that photograph there, 1900, 1910. That looks like some other hipster that's become a project manager as well. So, he started to create this for the purposes of planning and resource application and for sharing in amongst the team. So, more than 100 years of age, the Gantt chart must be a pretty good system because, it's still going strong. And, it's whether you're using Prince 2, which is the big complex project management tools, or whether you're doing something in MS Project, which you can do project management as well, or whether you're doing something in Excel, which is usually most of our projects that we might be operating, is usually quite good enough. So we can see the guy here has got his got his Gantt chart here, but let's have a look at something in a little bit more detail here. So this is my example of a Gantt chart. So this is related to a made-up project called London Office Move. This is during the planning stage that was done in March, and it's version 1 in some year. So what's happened here is our post-it notes have now been transferred into our Gantt chart, and they become a list of tasks. So kept this one fairly simple here with 10 tasks so that we can see it and get our arms around it. But now what we started to add here is who owns that task, so who's responsible for it. It might be a group of people, but ideally, somebody is leading that group of people and they're ultimately responsible for that. Here we have, this is our sequencing, this is our task predecessor. So this says, as an example, staff communication. We can't have the staff communication number 2 until we've done project kickoff, because that's number 1. We can't order the new furniture until we've communicated to the staff, but we can order new furniture and sort out a removal company at the same time, once we've had the communication and the kickoff. So the sequencing here is not necessarily 1 through 10. And as you see, as we go across here, these are our dates. This one I've done in weeks. They could be days, or they could be months. You can see when these particular tasks are targeted for. So these 2 only take a day. A larger one down here, the new office IT. All of this stuff has to be done, but then it's a 3-week task, or 15-day task, and therefore there's a lot of things that can't happen until this has happened. So each of these is called a swim lane. 2, 3, 4, 5, and it manages the sequencing. It may be that some of these projects are quite complex. So it might be Rich here, who's in charge of the office IT. It may be that he has a sub-project plan for the new IT. So behind this project plan, he might have his own project plan and a few people doing different things on that. So this could be the overall project at a higher level. There might be sub-projects that are going on behind this. So at the planning stage, it's really important for us to make sure that we've got all the tasks, make sure we've allocated owners, make sure that we really understand the sequencing, have a pretty good idea. We all know that projects don't quite work out as planned, but at least if you've got a plan, you've got a better chance as to what we think is going to happen here. And then we set a target around that, and then that gives us our Gantt chart. The great thing about Gantt charts, and you can design them and make them with whichever way is suitable for you, because it might be just something you manage in your own project and nobody else is involved, or it may be that there are other people involved. They then become part of stage 3, because then they become a communication stroke delivery tool. So outside the scope of what we're doing today, but as we move on to after the kickoff, did that happen on time? And we start to do what's called RAG analysis, red, amber, green, to see what's on time, green, what there's running a little bit late, amber, and where there's a big red flag. So you start to color code this, and then it becomes a tool for managing your project. You can see what's working, what's not working. great for communication amongst the team, also great for communication, up the chair. So if your executive says, how's that project going, rather than start rambling on and saying, well, this is working, that's not working, or it's all okay. Out comes your Gantt chart, piece of paper or on your screen, and you can talk about it. So it's a great tool for planning, and then it becomes imperative for delivery as well. So good tool, needs to be as complex as you want it to be, but the clearer that you can see it and manage it, the better the tool it is. And as much as your post-it notes are great for getting the stuff together, the Gantt chart then becomes the clarity and the management tool. So that's the Gantt chart. Step 5. So this may or may not be applicable depending on your project. Usually there's some costs that are going to be incurred within your project. So it may be that part of the preparation and the justification is that you have an overall budget, but actually down at the planning stage, which is where we're focusing now, is we need to be able to detail what the budget is, so that when we come to the delivery stage, that we're able to manage it. So let's have a look at what a budget page looks like. Looks a bit like the Gantt chart. Well, that's because it's come out of Excel, and we've kept this fairly simple. I always like dating a budget the April the 1st, and then when it goes wrong, you can just tell everybody it was a bit of a joke. So what we've got here, you will notice that all of the tasks from the Gantt chart are listed in the budget. And that is so when we're matching or giving ownership to the budget of various line items, they will match the Gantt chart and the owners on the Gantt chart. So I've got the 10 items in here. As it happens, we don't need any money for a project kickoff or staff communication for this thing. It might be if you were having a big meeting and there was lunch and venues and things, but this there isn't. But the line items that I've got here, there's a budget. So a budget is a plan, same way as our Gantt chart starts off as a plan. We may or may not be accurate in these. So some of these might be quotes or estimations or best guesses. But we put this together. So this budget here is £22,000 for the move. And like the Gantt chart, once we get into delivery, we can then start to use this as a tool as to how are we doing. So here's the plan. But down here, as we start to incur the costs or buy the furniture, etc., we can put in the actual cost. And here there's a tracker called a variance. So a variance is, was it better or worse? How much does it vary to the original plan? So we can put what it cost in here and track it. Or it might be that if it's a project of longevity, it might be that we need to update our budget by producing a forecast. So a forecast is a latest and greatest against the budget. So again, this becomes very much part of the plan, but then becomes part of the delivery as a tracker. And down here, I've got over budget or risk or on budget. This becomes my little color coding. Again, my rag, red, amber, green, as to how well we're doing. So if we spend 5,000 and no more, we'll be nice and green. But if it goes to 5.5, we'll be red, and we might have to use some contingency down here. So this contingency piece, if we take that out, I've added all of this stuff up and it's 20,000. And then I've said, well, you never know with these things. So add another 10%, 2,000 contingency. So our budget is 20,000, which just gives us a little bit of wiggle room as we go through things here. So that's step 5, the budget. Very much part of the planning stage, but also very much part of the delivery stage when we start to go through it. So step 6, which is my final step within my 6-step planning process, is very much around agree the plan. So this might be if you're doing it yourself, that you're just having a look and you're looking at your Gantt chart, you're looking at your budget, having a look at the timings and costs and those sort of things. It might be, okay, that's fine, that makes sense, that's what I'm going to do. But if there's more people involved, or you know, you've got a team of people doing this, or you might have to go back to the business case. It's very important that before you dive in and start marching towards the project outcomes, that actually everybody is signed off on all of the pieces on there. So back on our Gantt chart, if we think about Rich, who got a big chunky piece on there for the IT piece, does that 15 days, I think it was. Has Rich bought into that? Does he agree with it? Does he agree with the, however much the budget was, I can't remember, you know, does he agree that that's the budget? Because that's that lead person, that's their commitment to this plan. Because we know, you know, through our swim lanes, through our dependencies, that if Rich hasn't got it quite right, was just winging it or guessed, the impact to other pieces of the project further down the line can be impacted. So it has to be a collaborative agreement before we say, okay, team, let's go. So step six, you know, seems like, oh, you know, here we go, we're ready to go, let's get going. But actually it's really important, and it might be a little bit of a loop that we go back and we have to, you know, re-agree or replan before we go to the delivery stage. So that's the 6 steps. So we've got our preparation stage there around our business case and our justification as to why are we doing this. Planning all of the details, using our 6 steps from identifying the tasks, arranging them into a process, recognizing the sequencing, so the dependencies and what comes after this, or we can't do that before that, or we can do this at the same time, formalizing it into a Gantt chart, using, you know, some complex tools, or I would recommend most of us knocking it up in an Excel chart. Make sure that we understand and we've got buy-in for the budget, and then making sure that we agree the plan. Because once we've got those stages, you know, we can then go to start delivering our tasks, kicking off the project, getting the team together, and start to monitor and control before we evaluate and check in how we've done. So that's absolutely our summary. So somehow here my project must have exceeded expectations, because that's that's most of the input for you, which I guess is good, because it gives us some more time for some questions here. So feel free to put some questions down here. Use the chat box, because there's quite a few of us on here, so it's probably easier. Anybody got any questions around the process, or any examples of stories where you've seen this, or how this works, where you'd like to use it? Who came up with some projects in their mind and used it as an example? Feel free to use the chat box.
Yeah, I think for me, Malcolm, thank you, because I think I'm always kind of one of those people where I've got this idea in my mind, and then I really want to get to this, and I don't think about the stuff in the middle of it, or it comes to me at the last minute. So I think having something like that would be really great, really great. I've used, and I don't know whether anybody else has, I've used Trello before as a project manager.
Yes, another good example. Yeah.
I was interested to see, I think that's the question that's come in here. So what project management tools or systems would people recommend? So I'd be really keen to see what anybody is using or has used in the past and would recommend. If you can, Trello. I think it's a Asana one, or am I just making that up?
No, that's good. So yeah, and somebody's put APM, which is the there's a they've got APM have got a very good website on some tools. Trello, I've been using Trello for a little bit for some projects. I like it because it gives you good visibility, and I like having the stuff online where you can pick and move the cards around and create new swim lines. I still sometimes go back to my Gantt charts in conjunction with Trello, because the Gantt chart is often quite useful for seeing some time frames and things. So with Trello, sometimes it's not quite a visual on the time frame. Quite good for the sequencing, but not necessarily on the time frame unless you download some of the stuff. So a bit of a combination there. I think it's horses for courses. MS Project, you can produce a Gantt chart in MS Project if you've got more things, and it's quite easy to get going. Sometimes I find that if you use something too complex, actually you become a slave to the tool rather than the tool actually working for you. But anybody that works, in an agile methodology, so particularly if anybody works around software development or engineering, I got a few clients that do that. They use a combination of Trello boards on big screens in rooms with Gantt charts. So yeah.
I'm also intrigued to know. I don't know if you can pop this into the chat box, everybody, as well. How many of you? Because I think we've heard so many times that PAs and EAs, for example, are going more towards the project management side. So I'm really intrigued to know how many of you are quite involved in projects at the moment. If you could let us know in the chat box, that would be great, because some people have elements of that included in their role. Some people are very much focused on that. So yeah.
And I think the other thing about that, Dan, is that although it may not be in your job description that you will be expected to do some project management, all of you do some from time to time, but may not necessarily think about it as a project or applying project management methodology. It's that you all get involved in doing things like like organizing events. I'm wondering, Dan, last night how that was organized and how using a Trello board or a Gantt chart could have come about.
Yeah, I think I used the Trello board for the conference. I didn't use the Trello board for the awards because I literally had a week to organize it. So it was just so fast paced. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But
so for me, that would be an even better reason to actually try and get all the stuff and get it into a Gantt chart, because when you're rushing, that's where you put the kettle on without putting the water in there.
Absolutely. But we've had in a chat box here, so we've had definitely worth time to do the preparation, just needs to be able to do the planning stage quicker, so not to be chased for results. I'm so bad with being digital with my project management. I've always had successful projects, but it's mostly all in my head or manually recorded in notebooks and post-its. Looking forward to learning more effective skills so I can report back to my boss more professionally. So that's great. And then
I'll give you another example. Last night we were watching, I think it was the third episode of if anybody's seen it, Sarah Beanie buying a big plot of land in Somerset, moving from her very nice house in London. She's obviously got plenty of dosh, but they wanted to they bought an old farmhouse which was a bit derelict, so they wanted to buy this or build this very, very nice house which her husband had developed and designed. So he's very methodical and is project managing this whole thing, but she just wants to get going. She would just dig in the footings and doing fencing and that sort of stuff. But they had to wait 7 months for planning permission. Of course, the planning permission became a massive dependency for doing all of the other stuff. So it was kind of interesting watching the dynamics between the two of them, where she's just wanting to get going, and he's like, well, actually, if we don't get the planning permission, we've just wasted all this time or this money, or we might have to adapt it. So him using some process and tools was a good way of managing her let's just get going type activity, which could be fine, but it also could be a waste of resources, of time or energy or money or etc.
But I think from a developmental point of view as well, we always get asked the question, Malcolm, how can I develop in my role? And really, I think taking an interest in something like this in project management and taking the reins on it and being able to implement a project or come up with an idea yourself and go forward with that project and make it happen is something that I would imagine is really attractive to employers and also great for, you know, appraisals, etc. as well.
I'll give you a good story, Dan. So a long time ago, I had a young guy working for me, and we used to, American company, and we used to get royal visitations from guys from the States. And I used to get my team together and make sure they got 10 minutes in front of you know, my boss or my boss's boss whenever they came over and visited. So really good young lad, and he was running an activity for improving a process of processing invoices in finance. Not very exciting, but so we did a little dry run, and he told me all of the things that he was doing around improving it, which was fantastic. But I said, you know, when you present that to these guys from the States, you know, you need to formalize it a little bit. So I said, do a little Gantt chart. And he said, oh, I'm just doing Gantt charts in my studies. He said, that's a good idea. So he spent 10 minutes doing a Gantt chart, put all of his stuff together that was in his head, did his Gantt chart. Guys came over, he presented the little Gantt chart to them. 4 weeks later, I got a call from my boss saying, is Matt interested in coming over to Chicago for 3 months on a maternity assignment? I really liked his approach to managing projects. We need that over here for a short project. So all he did was knocked up a Gantt chart with all the stuff that was in his head, presented to somebody. He got a 3-month assignment in the US. He got a promotion out of it.
Wow, so, that's amazing.
So there's a good example of, you know, being able to actually do something, but actually demonstrate that you can do it with some tools that will blow somebody away. Say, oh, yeah, he's good, she's good. Well, no, they know what they're doing. So,
so well, we've got in here, I think some people have put in the chat box that they are doing projects. Some people work on conferences or large scale events as projects or on an ad hoc basis. So that could be, obviously, if in the future we get to do that face to face, but also online. I guess people can use this personally, like if you're having an extension,
without a doubt,
kitchen done, or I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, clearing out your garage, or redesigning your garden, or arranging a birthday party or a big celebration. You know, we can't do those.
So Christmas is coming up. Christmas could be a great one, isn't it? You know, that's a great example of how you could use project management personally, or put it into practice for yourself before kind of doing that for your business as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'll definitely be getting a Gantt chart out as to how we're going to be doing Christmas lunch, Dan, and that would go down really well with the family.
Get out of the tier that you're in, yeah.
but it is great if you were organising a big wedding anniversary or a wedding birthday party or something like that. When we're allowed to do that, it's perfect. Yeah, it doesn't need to be complex, but it makes sure you get all the tasks, all the visibility, know what's got to be done when, what the sequence is, who's doing what. Because it just gives you that at the front of your mind, and it's just a little checkbox rather than have it all in your head and something falls through the cracks.
Absolutely. Well, we've got here people used to be working on projects, but not at the moment. Project management skills are definitely part of the future of the PA and EA role. Due to COVID-19, we are expected now to work on more projects, which is insightful. I think you gave a great example there, Malcolm, of the office move or the office change.
Office layouts.
In the office, yes, mainly events, small conferences outside of COVID, but have been asked to be involved in a global project. So now I have a better idea around planning for it. Thank you. That's great. Some people have a project coordinator role, creating Gantt charts when the tasks have been agreed, and then holding people to account. As Malcolm said, it's part of the role when developing new ideas for business or organising things. So many people agreeing with you here, Malcolm. Absolutely. Conferences are a good example. I was wondering about looking into, is it Airtable? Is that good for project management? Do you know that one, Malcolm?
I don't know that one. That's a new one to me. Not heard of that.
If anyone knows anything about Airtable, or
share it with us.
Please do share that with us. Any books that you can recommend, Malcolm?
Classic Project Management for Dummies is brilliant. So you know, I love the dummy stuff because I'm happy to be treated as a dummy and you know, get down to the nuts and bolts. You know, that would be my go-to book. But you know, there's quite a lot of resources online without actually buying a book. And you know, I would definitely recommend, you know, creating your own little templates. So you know, making sure my little idea there, my little four stage thing, you know, you could have that somewhere on the corner of your desk. Knock up a Gantt chart in Excel for a particular project or even one you've done in the past. And then when you come to do a new one, you know, the tasks will change and the sequencing and all that stuff, but at least you've got the Excel framework that you can then tap it out. So, you know, that little one there that I did as a made up example in a framework would probably take 5 or 10 minutes to do. And then, you know, when you're working with other people, you know, you either go and see them, or if you Zoom in or something, share it, and then you collaboratively you can put it together. So, you know, create a little suite of your tools.
I think we've had some comments. So actually, and it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, Malcolm, that this actually comes fairly natural to all of us. It's just actually putting it down and making ourselves more organized, and that PAs and
formalizing it
are already project managers, but
yeah,
we just probably don't recognize it because we might not formalize it, or we might not write it down in such detail. So some great comments in the chat box here. Would you recommend undertaking any additional training, Malcolm? What a great question.
Oh, that's a good question, Dan. So you set me up there beautifully there. So it just so happens that in a couple of weeks' time we've got our full day, the accredited introduction to project management. So it's running virtually 9:30 to 4:30, and we currently have a Black Friday discount voucher that if you go to our website you can download that. And what I'm also prepared to do is that if you want to come on this particular one, I'll give you another 15% on that. So there'll be a 30% discount on that if you want to book on that in a couple of weeks. If that's a bit short notice for you, and it might be for some of you, we tend to run this once a quarter. It's part of our level 3 SFJ qualifications, our certificate course. So it's a module within that. So you know, people come along that are doing the full qualifications and do this module, but you don't have to do the full qualifications to attend the one-day course as well. So it will appear again probably in the February timeframe. But if you want to have a nice 30% discount, feel free to drop me a line or go onto our website and register some interest there as well.
Thank you so much for that, Malcolm, as well.
Well, thank you, Daniel. That was great. I need to put you on the sales team.
No, so there was a question from Aisha, but she's also said as well about the Prince 2 qualification. Now, the Prince 2, I think I know one of the EAs I used to work with, she did a Prince 2. It's very
it's quite intense. I think it's a two-week course with an exam at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's for, I would say it's for project managers that are doing project management pretty much all of the time, but doing fairly complex projects as well. So big projects. So I would think a big project would be something, you know, that could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3-year type project. So it could be, you know, something very big. And then it might be useful to have Prince 2. Having said that, our very basic framework type stuff, all of the Prince 2 stuff hangs off of this. It's just a lot more detail, and you know, some other things around risk analysis and things, which actually we cover in our one-day course that I'm showing here. So, you know, if you want to become a project manager, you know, work at a reasonably senior level on some reasonably complex projects, you know, that would be a good thing a string to add to your bow. But if it's, you know, if you're just doing some project management on smaller projects as part of another role, you know, it might be a bridge too far, but you know, it's worth investigating.
Thank you, Malcolm. And then just to finish off, I think we've got one last question here. There's been lots of responses to it in the chat room, but this is my role is split between PA and project coordination. I am able to influence but struggle with team members who do not want to engage or want to complete the tasks required.
Great question.
Not
Great
having
question.
that senior manager title seems to be a barrier. If you got any advice for that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, you know, often in your roles that you are coordinating a project without delivering any of the specific items, and then you're coordinating all sorts of people, and some of those are really helpful, and some of them are, you know, they're always late or don't want to talk to you or something. So really, for me, the best thing to do is you have your Gantt chart with all of the tasks. You're making sure that the tasks are allocated to the people that have the responsibility, and that Gantt chart becomes the communication tool. And then your executive or your supervisor, you know, uses that Gantt chart for communication purposes, because then you will then find all of a sudden that people that are always a bit late or not doing this or not particularly helpful to you, if they know that you're consolidating that information and then it sits on the executive's desk and they're likely to make a call to somebody, you'll suddenly find that you might get a bit more buy-in than you would do if they think that they're answering to you, that actually they start to realize that they're answering to, you know, to somebody else who has a bit more, you know, a bit more influence than unfortunately you might do sometimes. So, you know, you coordinate it on behalf of somebody that can help you with the influencing.
Yeah, I think great. Yeah, great question, great answer. Thank you.
I was doing this course a couple of weeks ago, and one of the people suddenly realized that this was a really good tool and that they didn't need to be doing all of the stuff in order to be managing the project. So, you know, you're managing or coordinating, not necessarily doing. And then, you know, the Gantt chart and the communication thereof, you know, becomes the thing that you didn't have to be responsible for everything, but you might be responsible for communicating it.
No, thank you so much, Malcolm. Just to finish off, so someone's asked if the recording will be available. The recording will be available on the PA Forum YouTube channel. We won't be able to share the slides, unfortunately, but obviously if you wanted to refer back to this, then you're more than welcome. And obviously we'll send out all the details that Malcolm has kindly sent through for all the discounts, etc. And if you're interested in having a chat or got any specific questions, he'd love to be able to talk to you. So
absolutely, feel free to you know, to email me or drop me a note or find me on LinkedIn. I'm probably linked into a lot of you already, but if there's something you particularly want to talk about or want some advice, or just drop me a note or give me a shout. I love being connected.
Perfect, thank you. And just to let you know, we have got a final social event this evening. So if you are around at 7 o'clock while we're in lockdown and you fancy an evening of festive inspiration with some artistry and poetry tonight, where you can use for team building, that's come highly recommended from one of our PAs in Coventry and Warwickshire. So if you would like to join us, that's a free event and our very, very last social event of the year. So all that's left for me to say is, if I don't speak to you before, everybody, have a fantastic Christmas, and I cannot wait to see you all again in 2021. And thank you so much, Malcolm, for all your support. So thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck with your projects.
Thank you. I just stopped the recording.